Very good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chip Coldren. I'm Director of Training and Technical Assistance with the BJA CNA Smart Policing Initiative. And I think, as most of you know, we're on a webinar today kind of introducing smart policing and helping us get ready for the National Smart Policing meeting that's going to happen in mid-April. So I'd just like to say a few kind of housekeeping items, and then we'll launch into the agenda. Vivian, am I controlling this, or are you?
I am.
Okay, very good. So just a couple things. This should go for about an hour. I think you may have seen the message, but I want to remind everybody that we record these webinars. So if anybody can't make it, they can view it at a later point in time. We will also, at the end of the webinar, we'll send out an email link to an evaluation that we'd like you to do about how the webinar went. And we like these things to be somewhat conversational and interactive, but sometimes people don't feel like they have enough time to get their questions or their comments in, so we encourage use of the chat room. On the right-hand side here, we can record everything that's said in the chat room too, and if there's any comments or questions that are not attended to during the webinar, we can follow up on them later. So having said that, let's launch into the agenda. Vivian? Thank you. Thank you. So we have today I'm working with my colleagues Hildy Sizo from Arizona and Vivian Chu from CNA in Virginia. Hildy is, as you can see, a subject matter expert with us. She's been with the Smart Policing Initiative since its inception several years ago. And Vivian, I think, has been with us for a couple years now. So what I'd like to do, I think the best way to do this is just run down the list of participants on the right-hand side here. But I'd just like everybody to very briefly just say hello, who you are and where you're from. Chris Delaney, why don't you start?
Hi, this is Chris Delaney from Rochester, New York. I'm the project manager on the Rochester Police Department side. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence here.
Thank you. Hildy, you want to say hello?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Hildy Sizo, and I talked with many of you in the first conference calls we had with the News 84 site. So I look forward to working with you.
Great. Thank you. Iris?
This is Iris Gonzalez, and I'm the project manager for SPI. And so you'll be hearing from me more, and I'm looking forward to meeting you at our meeting in April.
Thank you. Jane?
Hi, this is Bridget and Jamie with the Columbia Police Department.
Very good. Thank you. Jeff?
I believe that's our research partner over at USC. They might not be on the phone. He said he wasn't going to be able to call in, but Dr. Rojek is one of our research partners with the University of South Carolina.
Got it. All right. John, are you there?
Yes, this is John McCluskey at RIT, and I'm with Ershad Alzheimer. We're sort of standing in for John Clofus.
Good person to stand in for.
Yeah, it's taking two of us.
Justin.
Hey, Justin Nix. I'm a PhD student at USC. I work under Dr. Rojek as a research partner for Columbia.
Very good. You'll have a fun time. Gaines.
My name is Melvin Gaines, and I'm with the East Palo Alto Police Department, actually here with Chief Ron Davis, Kimberly Smith, and Captain John Cook. We're all logged in under one account.
Very good. Hello, everybody.
Hi. Hey, I believe our research partner, Sarah Lawrence, is from another site. She should be on the online as well.
Yep, I see her name. Thanks.
Okay, outstanding.
Good. Michael?
Hi, this is Mike White. I am the research partner for the Glendale site, and I'm also a subject matter expert.
Thank you, sir. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
I'm Rachel Santos. I'm the research partner for Port St. Lucie. Actually, Roberto isn't able. He's the project manager for the police department. He's not able to make it today. I thought they had some folks who are supposed to be logging in, so their project team might be logging in here in a little bit. They might be a little late. I'm not sure.
No, we're here. We're here. It's Detective Brett LaGregor with Port St. Lucie Police Department, along with several others from the police department here.
Welcome. Thank you.
Oh, great. Great. Sorry, I didn't see a name that I recognized.
Very good. Sarah?
Hi, this is Sarah Lawrence from UC Berkeley, and I'm the research partner for East Palo Alto.
And Scott?
Yeah, this is Scott Wolf from USC, one of the research partners with Dr. Rozak and Justin with Columbia Police.
Great, thank you. Did I miss anybody? Great. Well, thank you all for that. Let's go to the next slide, Vivian. So this is the agenda for the webinar. I want to make a couple points about this. As you can see, there's several things that we want to cover. I'm going to start with kind of an overview of the genesis of the ideas around smart policing and how smart policing looks, maybe as you would think, from the top down. I'm going to turn it over to Hildy for a few minutes, and she's going to talk about what the sites are actually doing and some of the problems they're addressing. So then we'll get to several of the key components that we think are important for people to understand. And everybody probably understands these things regarding the need for analysis and research and the need for planning and the issues around organizational change. We like to have as many people as we can going through this with us together, so when we get to the meeting in April, we have at least, I'd like to say maybe we're in the same chapter. I don't know that we're all going to be on the same page, but that's one of the main reasons for doing this introductory webinar, to start to have a conversation amongst ourselves about what the key themes in smart policing are and some of the expectations from BJA. So we'll talk about some of those components. Then I'm going to introduce a couple of the sites that have finished up in the past year and just talk briefly about the kinds of things that they're finding and the results that smart policing is having in these sites. Then I'll turn it back over to Hildy, who's going to talk in more detail about what's going to happen at the meeting in April, and then Vivian's going to end us up with some talk about how the website can be helpful to you now and in the future. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as I said, this is something of a discussion about why the federal government, why BJA created smart policing in the first place, what they had in their minds when they were creating it. I really like to be very, very clear about how we look at this. I think there's as much kind of bottom-up work going on here in terms of the sites, the funded sites actually helping us define what smart policing is by doing what they do and documenting what they do. So in some sense, smart policing is what you do. In another sense, smart policing is what the federal government thinks is going on. And sometimes I think about the role of CNA as the training TA coordinator, as the group that's kind of mediating between those two. So, but there's clearly as much going on at the site level that helps define what smart policing is as there is at the federal level, but we start with a federal perspective. So when we talk about smart policing amongst ourselves and when we go to conferences, and we'll do this again at the April meeting, we like to think about smart policing organizations as very strategic and proactive. We like to talk about them as being science-based, and maybe a better way to say that as moving more directly towards the incorporation of evidence and determining what practices they use, so the term evidence-based practice comes up a lot. We think that smart policing departments, agencies, and projects do a better job of using data and intelligence information, better job at utilizing technology, ongoing and a stronger focus on partnerships and collaboration. And as you'll see later, we believe that this issue of partnership and collaboration is as important internal to the agency, the police agency, as it is between the police agency and other collaborators. So I remember this from my work in community policing a long time ago. Sometimes I think smart policing agencies are supposed to exhibit those characteristics of a learning organization. They have ongoing monitoring and analysis, providing feedback into the organization. They're transparent about what they're finding and how they use that information. And they do this because they understand the need to constantly adapt to what is a very, very dynamic environment, politically, socially, economically, and so forth. And I also want to stress at this point that there's a lot of other things, more specific strategies and tactics that go into smart policing. You'll hear us talk an awful lot about outreach and collaboration, place-based approaches and offender-based approaches, strengthening crime analysis, getting involved in some cost-benefit analysis, not just understanding the impacts of what smart policing projects do, but the fiscal impacts of that. And as you'll see later on in this webinar, we talk an awful lot, and we try to get the sites to think an awful lot about issues of organizational change, and when change occurs that seems to be good and economical, how to sustain that change. So we do spend quite a bit of time talking about organizational change and sustainability. We can't cover all that today in this 1 hour, but we like to explain that those are all aspects of smart policing that we talk about and that we train about, and then we provide technical assistance around. Some of that will be covered in the national meeting, and some of it is available through other venues. So next slide, please. I've heard this question now hundreds of times. What's so new about smart policing? To some people, some of us who have been around for a while, smart policing may look very similar to some things that we've worked on before, like problem-oriented policing, like application of the SARA model, like community-oriented policing, or now intelligence-led policing, CompStat approaches. John Clofus would tell you that smart policing in some ways looks a lot like what NAJ called strategic approaches to community safety. There's elements of Project Safe Neighborhoods with smart policing, so that's all true. In some sense, we think of smart policing as a natural evolution that has taken stock of a lot of these approaches, taken what's been learned through research on a lot of these approaches, and is kind of advancing police management and police science based on the use of this evidence. So it's not always necessarily the newest thing under the sun. Often when we talk about smart policing, we stress that we might focus a little bit more on technology than some of these other approaches. We continue to keep a strong focus on research partnerships and research collaborations, which I think were evident in some of these other approaches, but not necessarily the strongest suit in them. There's not a heck of a lot of cost-benefit analysis that's going on, and we stress the importance of that in smart policing, maybe more than some other approaches. And if you understand anything about BJA's expectation from smart policing and I guess the most critical component that we talk about is about these research partnerships, and obviously we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So I like to think sometimes that police and communities and collaborative projects have a pretty full toolbox these days in terms of the strategies and the tactics and the approaches that they can use to address problems that they're confronted with. Maybe the way to think about smart policing is that smart policing is doing the additional research that helps them decide which tools or which blend of those tools are most appropriate for certain situations. Let's go to the next slide, please. Oh, and of course, anybody on the line is free to challenge any of this or to make a comment about any of this or to add their perspective on this. So please feel free to do that if you'd like. We often talk about the fact that there's a lot going on in policing today and a lot going on in smart policing that takes us all the way back to Robert Peel. So Mike Medeiros, who is in some senses the father of smart policing at BJA, he will tell you that his mission with smart policing, or one of his missions with smart policing, was to bring prevention back into policing and make prevention cool again. So we bring up Peel's principle about the function of police is to prevent crime and disorder, and that the ability of the police to do that is largely dependent on their relationship with their public, and that the test of police efficiency is not a measurement of all the activities that they're engaged in, but in the visible evidence of reduction of crime and social problems. So not so new, but definitely part of smart policing. Next. Another way to say it, and this probably comes out of the BJA fact sheet that you have probably seen at one time or another. The goal of smart policing is to design, pilot, and test innovative policing strategies and tactics. This says that are offender-based or place-based and effective, efficient, and economical. I might say that test out to be effective, efficient, and economical, because some of the testing we do in smart policing basically demonstrates to us that what we thought was efficient, effective, and economical is not necessarily so. The role of CNA in this, obviously, is to support the sites through a rather comprehensive array and variety of training and technical assistance resources, which I'm going to talk about for a minute right now. So there's several things that happen in smart policing in the way of training and technical assistance. As you can tell, there are national meetings, and I believe you were required to budget to attend 3 of them as part of your project. So that's definitely a major venue through which we deliver technical assistance and training in a variety of ways. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We make extensive use of webinars like this. If you're familiar with our website, you know that there's about 10 or 12 of them that we have put on in the past with Scott Decker and John Eck and Ed McGarrell and some other folks, Hildy Sizo. And they're recorded and available for anybody to view anytime that they want to. Our most recent one actually was, I think, a more creative one that we did on how to be a smart policing officer. So we had one of our sites who has been a smart policing grantee for several years put together a webinar on actually what it means to be an officer in a smart policing agency and how the agency can support that officer. So those webinars are available, and that's another one of our major training and TA products. And we consider our website, actually, it's grown extensively over the past several years. It has a lot of information, a lot of opportunities for the sites to present and discuss what they're doing, opportunities for these webinars, and so it's a rather, in and of itself, it's a major technical assistance delivery tool for smart policing. I think you all know by now that another one of our methods is to pair you up with a subject matter expert. This is an individual who will contact you initially at least once a month and just start a conversation with you and track how things are going, see if there's anything that any of our SMEs or any of us can do to be of assistance if you're encountering any challenges or coming up with some issues that you didn't expect when you started out. We do want to stress at this point that if you're assigned to a particular SME, it doesn't mean that that's the one that you have to work with exclusively. So if you're working with, who's one of our, Nola Joyce is an SME that we have assigned to Columbia, South Carolina, because the work she did in Philadelphia is relevant to the work they're doing down there. But something could come up in South Carolina where they think that John Eck or Scott Decker or Hildy or anybody could be useful to them. We have Charles Stevenson, who focuses almost exclusively on issues around technology, and Julie Wartell, who focuses on crime analysis. And all of those subject matter experts are available to you if you think you'd like to use them or need them. Next, please. We also have the capacity to provide individualized assistance, so there have been times when a site has requested a one-on-one visit with a subject matter expert, and that is possible to do. So there are, a lot of different ways that you can access technical assistance, and we encourage you to think about them and explore them, and it's something that we will touch base with you on during those consultation calls, those monthly calls, and during the meetings that we have, like the one coming up in D.C. Next, please. So let me turn this over to Hildy for a few minutes. She's going to talk a little bit about the funded sites up till now and what they've been up to. Hildy?
Thank you, Chip. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and talk about those sites that have been involved in smart policing for a number of years and can really be provide an opportunity for you to learn from their experiences. So we started smart policing back in 2009 when the Phase 1 sites came on board. There were 10 of them at that time. Then the following year began Phase 2, and 6 additional smart policing sites came on board. Just a year and a half ago or so, Phase 3 started. We ramped up to about 15 new sites. And then, of course, you all are part of Phase 4, and there's 4 sites involved in this phase. With the addition of Kansas City, which makes the 5th site that's in Phase 4. They initially were in Phase 3, but because of some circumstances, they had to wait, and now they're implementing their initiative with you all. So we wanted to provide you with exactly who these sites are and a little bit about their initiative. And we want you to feel free to contact those sites, to learn from those sites. We're very keen on peer-to-peer interaction. And if you would like us to initiate some interaction between a site that you think would be particularly relevant to you, we can do that as well. But, for example, we've listed these sites not in phase order, but in what crime issue they were addressing. And so you can see that a number of our sites really focus in on violent crime. Boston, in particular, was looking at homicide. And really their project is focused on organizational change and how they're addressing homicide and can improve their clearance rates. A number of other sites focus specifically on violent crime, but using tactics such as place-based policing, offender-based policing, problem-oriented policing, or hotspot policing. You want to go to the next slide, Vivian? A number of other sites have been looking at variations on violent crime, drugs, domestic violence. We have 5 sites that were specifically looking at gun violence and are now coming up with their results. And some of you may be particularly interested in their initiatives and what results they're having addressing gun violence from the smart policing perspective. The next slide. We also have sites that are looking at some other issues such as repeat offenders, burglary, robbery, and neighborhood disorder. But the majority of our sites are really focusing in on either place-based or offender-based policing. But there's a small number of sites that are really looking at organizational change, moving their departments from a more traditional department to one that's really focused on how data and analysis can help them focus and develop some new strategies for addressing crime. Also, a couple of sites are looking at institutionalizing evidence-based practices. And then a couple of sites are looking at the implementation or the evaluation of specific technology. So that's a bit of an overview of those 32 sites that have already been funded for smart policing. And again, feel free to identify some of those sites that might be relevant to you and touch base with them and see what you can learn from those sites. Okay, next slide. Now we have this wealth of experience over a number of years, and we have identified some challenges that those sites have come across and have had to address. So we wanted to point those out to you. First of all, smart policing is about innovation and new ways to address these older intractable problems that we've been trying to address for many years. But there's some challenges to actually coming up with something that's innovative or creative or new. Obviously, we're also focused on evidence-based practices, which means it's something we've been doing and evaluated already and has some effective results. So how do we make those innovative? And that's something we struggle with all the time, we talk about, and we hope that you will consider that this is an opportunity to do something different and new and in new ways, and that innovation is very important. Secondly, A challenge has been simply the time allotted in the grant period. In that grant period where you're expected to achieve some results. And we know 2 years is a rather short period of time. A number of the sites have struggled with actually achieving those results in that time period. So many of them have gotten extensions to their grants for anywhere from 3 to 6 to 9 months to a year. So that may be something you'll want to do as you move along in this project, is ask for an extension. In the next, in the new solicitation for smart policing, I think if you have a chance to look at that, you'll see that they've actually gone to a 3-year grant period for this very reason. The next challenge has been getting those research results. Not all sites actually can deliver sound, credible research results. And that's, part of what we're trying to do here is to see, are these initiatives effective or are they not, based on some credible evidence. But some of the sites have struggled with that issue, and that's why this technical assistance is so important, and that we hope you will reach out and get that assistance to help you in this area. Also, the use of technology has been a bit of a challenge because only a couple of sites have really focused on technology. And this is one of the principles of smart policing. So we hope to get more sites who are focusing on that issue. And we know there's one in this phase that is focusing on technology, so that's a good thing. You tell her out there. The next challenge has been sustaining proven practices and strategies. We know how important it is that if we find that the strategies we're using are in fact effective based on the research and the evidence, how will you sustain those successes? And that's something you have to consider early on. If we wait till the end, you find these approaches to be successful, and then you think about sustaining it over the long haul, it might be too late. So it's something we have to think about from the beginning, early on, establish those key relationships with stakeholders that can help you and support you in sustaining what you find to be effective, efficient, and worth sustaining in the long term. Certainly cost-effectiveness analysis is a principle we want to promote, but isn't always used or practiced. Chip has mentioned this already. Few sites are addressing this, but it is an important one to consider. And finally, reaching those important audiences that you have, or those important stakeholders, with information about results. So think about now, don't wait. Who are those important stakeholders you need to bring into your initiative to make sure you're successful, who you want to understand your results when you have them, and can help you sustain what's found to be effective. So think about your executive and command staff, other divisions within your department who are going to support you in your strategies and tactics. Other criminal justice agencies like probation, parole, the district attorney's office, the city manager's office, and certainly community groups who will be effective, who will be very affected by what you do out in the community. So these are all groups you may need to bring on board now, have them understand your initiative, have them buy into the process from the outset, and that will certainly help you as you move along. And in the end, then hopefully you'll want to sustain what you find is helpful and effective. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chip.
Thank you. So I'm going to launch into a discussion of a couple of the key components here, but I thought I would actually just take a second, see if anybody has any questions or comments about kind of how we've laid out these principles to this point. Anybody? We're all in agreement here? Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So there's 3 things I want to talk about, somewhat briefly, actually, that will be somewhat of a focus at the meeting coming up in April. And as I said earlier, one of them is this research collaboration, this research partnership. The other one has to do with what we're now calling action planning in the sites. And the third one has to do with this notion of organizational innovation, organizational change, and sustainability. So the point we like to make about the research partnerships is that in a fully functioning, well-functioning smart policing site, the research collaboration will touch on several aspects, and the researcher will be involved in several aspects of what's going on. And so we view this as getting involved early on in the identification of the problem to be addressed, or perhaps if there's been a problem that's been addressed for the purposes of writing the grant, working with the agency to develop a much deeper and a broader understanding of the nature and extent of that problem and its different causes and its different facets. And the more detail you have regarding that, obviously the better position you'll be in to craft solutions and approaches to solving those problems. And we envision the researcher as a full partner in crafting those solutions as well. Assuming that some solutions and approaches are put in place, the researcher should be involved in this process evaluation piece, monitoring what's going on, making observations, providing feedback to the team and the leadership about what's working well and what's not. I've actually seen some really good examples of that in the current sites that we have, where the researcher has actually played a very strong role in helping police management and police leadership make very important decisions about allocation of resources and things like that. And obviously, we like our researchers to be involved in the design of rigorous evaluation outcomes, and looking both at organizational impacts as well as external community, public safety related impacts, and clearly taking a strong role in that piece. So there's really at least three or four major ways that a research partner can be integrated into what's happening with smart policing. I think in reality, there's a continuum. You know, we've had some researchers that have been very much involved in the operational end of things and the crafting of solutions and the advising of senior leadership about what strategies ought to be built or how things ought to be organized, and not so terribly focused on the outcome evaluation. And we've had others that have almost strictly been involved in outcome evaluation and have not been so much involved in the early stages of the project or in the process evaluation. So depending on a number of factors, like how much you're being paid to do this and how much time you have to do it and other structural factors in your jurisdiction, it may or may not be easy to integrate yourself as a researcher into all these different roles. But that's what we like things to look like. That's what we think is a maximally effective research partnership. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I think that the main point I want to make here is this second bullet about the co-interpretation of data. One of the things we found we think is interesting and exciting about smart policing is that when you have a set of data, whether you're identifying hot spots or hot individuals in targeted offender lists or detailed analyses of problems that you want to address, we often find that if we start to share that information with people that we don't normally share it with, we get much different interpretations about what the troublesome areas are or who the problem individuals are. And I've seen several times where a smart policing team has invited the detective unit, the patrol unit, into a meeting to talk about the top 100 list of offenders that they've developed. And at the end of that meeting, or several meetings, they end up actually with a list that looks quite different. So we like to talk about the co-interpretation of this data, that including people in the interpretation phase and the problem analysis phase, and giving them a chance to look at what you're seeing and what your data is telling you can actually be a very interesting exercise. And this just speaks to the importance of having researchers closely collaborating with you. To be adept at this, to be good at this, police departments have to be able to do a lot of things that researchers do very well in terms of this analysis, looking at impacts, looking at outcomes, maybe doing a literature search that helps you identify what promising practices are around the country. So there's really good reasons for having researchers involved, maybe more closely than they have been in the past. Next, please. Okay, very quickly, and I'm going to pick on a couple of you right here. I want to hear how you're thinking about the role of the research partner, given what I've talked about here just for a few minutes, and whether your project has contemplated the collection of any new data since you submitted your proposal. So Chief Davis, can I pick on you for a minute? Maybe not. Sarah?
Yes.
How is East Palo Alto envisioning the role of you as a research partner?
Actually, Chief, did you just unmute and now you're there now?
Yeah, but you go ahead.
Okay. Well, the role that we have as a research partner, actually, I was just noting that maps pretty well to the components that you just talked about in terms of being involved with the problem analysis. And, you know, for those who don't know, we're using ShotSpotter data, which is a gunshot location detection system, to help identify some hotspots. And we're going to play a role in then shaping some of the strategies based on that problem analysis, and then also just serve as kind of an on-the-ground partner monitoring the implementation and some evaluation. So I feel like our scope of work pretty well maps to the components that you just laid out.
Nice, thank you. Is there anybody that has a slightly different view of this? Maybe they're setting up a different situation with the researcher?
This is Bridget from the Columbia Police Department.
Yes, Bridget.
Our relationship with our research partner, they're helping us to collect all of our data, but they're also going to kind of go internal with our department and do some surveys for us so we can actually measure our before and after with our organizational change.
Good, good. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to the next slide then. Thank you very much, both of you. I appreciate that. This is kind of interesting. When you come to the meeting in April, there is going to be some actual work done on what BJA now refers to as action plans. And the reason they do this is because if you looked at the recent solicitation that just came out for the 2013 funding cycle, there is now a requirement that each funded site submit an action plan that has all these specific elements in it. And the funding will occur in two phases, actually. They'll get funded to build this action plan, and then they'll present the action plan to BJA, and if BJA is satisfied with it, they'll get the funding to complete their work. But they're really moving towards this action plan orientation, and while you sites who were funded some time ago cannot be held to that expectation, we're going to spend some time at this meeting asking you to look at the proposals that you submitted originally, thinking about these research partnerships and this organizational change stuff that we're going to talk about, and ask yourselves the question about whether you might change some parts of your approach or your logic model or your plan for getting things done. And so when you come to the meeting, you're going to hear some talk from BJA about action plans, and there'll be at least 2 times during those 2 days where you'll have an opportunity to work as a team and just think a little bit about what things look like now compared to when you originally got your funding, which is now actually some time ago. So this is just BJA will kind of be presenting its vision for the future of smart policing and asking the current sites to think about their work in terms of this new vision that they're creating. So these action plans include things like the description of the problem and the analysis. They'd like to see the development of some formal logic models that kind of depict graphically all the resources that you have and the different things that you're doing and how they're supposed to be linked to the outcomes that you're looking for. They'd like to see some more formal agreements with the research partners, especially in terms of final products. one of the things that they've come to realize now that the first sites are finishing up and turning in their reports is that they were not very prescriptive initially in what the final report should look like. And so they're starting to think in more detail about what a final project report for smart policing should look like, and once that's developed, they'd like some semi or some formal agreement between the agency and the research partner, regarding the expectations for products. Next slide, please. They're also looking for some demonstration of executive support and commitment to the Smart Policing Initiative. That, as you can imagine, again, is across the board. There are some departments that have received grants that maybe had a change in leadership, and the new chief came in and decided that was not going to be his or her focus. So they'd like to help with support and sustainability, they'd like to see some demonstration of support. Clearly an evaluation plan, and again, specification of some specific final report that will be done. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think a lot of these things are things that you're doing anyway in some way, shape, or form, but there will be time spent at the meeting actually asking you to think through what your plans are, or where you're at now, where you might be in the next 3 to 6 months, and if anything has changed based on what you've learned or what you've experienced up till now. And the way you do that will be in some kind of an action plan format that BJA has in his mind. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Does anybody have a logic model at this point in time? Have you developed one, or a very specific plan for the next 2 years that has, timelines, responsibilities, deliverables, that kind of thing?
This is Sarah. I can speak for East Palo Alto. We don't have a logic model yet, but we do have a formal scope of work that we've worked out that has some deliverables and some timelines somewhat general, because as we get into the first stage, it'll probably be better refined what the deliverables are, but we have started some of that.
That's the trick in all this, right? Some of you aren't going to know exactly what you're doing until you get through the first 6 or 8 months of your work, so that's fair. That's fair. How would you describe the formality of your agreements with your research partners? Anybody?
This is Rachel Santos. In terms of, we also have, an agreement and we have a contract with the university, but even beyond that, I have already put our project through the IRB at the university, because I'm doing the interviews before and after, and that's really, predicated not just on a final report, but to be able to publish this, in peer reviews and that, so that we can get the information out there. So by making, the IRB, so as we all know, is a pain in the butt, but it's really a good thing to do because it makes that, the research legitimate and going through the system, which I think on my end as a research partner is really important for the legitimacy of the whole project.
Watch out, you're talking to a former IRB chair here.
Then you should be happy.
An official pain in the butt, yes. Okay, thank you. I see that we have like less than 15 minutes, so I want to kind of move to the next phase, if you don't mind, Vivian. Okay, so this is actually a biggie. I don't think that most of the current smart policing sites, now there's a few that have kind of caught on to this, but most of them have not approached their projects with long-term sustainability in mind. I think there's still a mindset that a federal grant is a federal grant, and you get the money and you get the time frame and you get the scope of work and you do it, and then you're done and you move on to the next grant. And what we strongly work on and consistently work on in smart policing is not just thinking about sustainability at the end of the grant, but considering sustainability issues and organizational change issues from the very outset, and basically treating sustainability as an outcome like anything else. So you plan for it, and you strategize around it, and you devote resources to it, and you put things in place along the way that help you have confidence that what you've done so long as it tests out to be effective and efficient and important, that what you've done can actually sustain in some way. This is a really difficult thing. I don't know of any organization that I've ever worked for in the history of my professional career that has figured this out as much as they would like to. I think police organizations are the same, and it's just one of those things that requires a constant effort. And so we stress organizational change and sustainability at almost every step of the way we're working on this. And so sustainability can take very different forms. It doesn't have to be the wholesale adoption of a new program that was tested in smart policing, but it could just be changing or setting priorities, maybe developing capacities in organizations to support this analysis. A lot of work that needs to be done, especially if you're adopting an intelligence-led policing approach. Major work needs to be done in your crime analysis units if you're going to be true to the intelligence-led policing model. So we can think kind of in a number of different ways about what we're looking for in terms of organizational change and what counts as organizational change. But we do like to keep our mind on this at all times. Next slide. So we like to talk about 3 things that are required, that have to be in place in the organization in order for innovation to take hold. We talk about empathy. Put yourself in the shoes of the people in your organization that are not directly involved in smart policing, and think about how they have to perceive it and how it needs to be communicated to them in order for them to see the importance and see the value of adopting the practices or adopting the approaches and philosophies. Just because you get it doesn't mean that a lot of other people will. Next. This is the diversity issue. I learned a long time ago that when I'm working on projects like this, that the biggest mistake I can make is, of course, to invite all the people on my planning team who are the people that agree with me and like what I'm doing. So you want to get diverse perspectives. I would even suggest that you want to get the people in your organization who are almost actively working against you, or that you anticipate would have an active objection to what you're proposing to do, and be really open about what you're doing and who you're including and the breadth that you go to communicate the importance of what you're doing. Next. And the other thing is risk-taking. This actually speaks a bit to organizational leadership. If there's not a culture of innovation or a culture of acceptance of a certain type of failure because you tried something that was interesting, it's really hard to sustain innovations that come from smart policing. Next. I'm going to breeze through this one. Let's go to the next one. Need to make tracks here. Next one. Okay, so this is what we have observed in several of our smart policing sites that have taken this organizational change and sustainability quite seriously. Several of them have actually modified how they conduct their police officer performance evaluations based on smart policing principles and practices. Others have, once they've completed their work, and again, once they've found things that seem to work well and that test well, they reach out to other agencies in the region and try to kind of get them involved and get them to understand what they're trying to do so that it filters out, kind of diffusion of knowledge approach. Some of them are much more actively and deliberately increasing their collaborations with external stakeholders. A lot of them are working on crime analysis issues. This is a huge issue with our departments and actually with BJA right now, finding ways to enhance crime analysis capabilities. Several of our funded projects have found ways to actually change the way that the CompStat meetings are run and to ensure that smart policing projects and objectives and directives are included in those CompStat meetings. And several of them have, in a number of different ways, found ways to integrate training around smart policing principles into what's going on, whether it's roll calls or online instruction that's available to the staff or even through the academy. Next. 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 Sorry about this, guys. We're getting close on time here. Okay. How many of you have actually anticipated some changes that need to occur within your organizations to ensure or increase your likelihood of success for your project? Nobody?
Chip, this is Justin.
Yes, Justin.
At USC, we're working with Columbia.
Yep.
Just in some initial analyses and things we've been looking at, we've noticed that field interview cards aren't being filled out probably as much as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
So we foresee that we're going to have to figure a way to get these guys to start filling out the cards more often so that we've got some data to work with.
Good, good. That's actually a very common issue in our smart policing projects, right? Getting the folks on the streets, the folks in the field, to understand the importance of what you're doing and to cooperate. And that actually, if you can do that, that's a significant organizational change. Yeah.
This is Scott, just from USC as well. Just to kind of piggyback off of what Justin was saying, another big thing dealing with crime analysis is simply getting the officers around the organization to realize how good they are and what resources they do offer. Is a big thing, and I'm sure we're not unique in that, but a significant hurdle we'll deal with.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Thank you for that. You know, one of the things that we witnessed in Glendale, actually, I'll talk about Mike White while he's on the phone. When they launched their initial smart policing initiative, they found the need to do something of a refresher training around problem-oriented policing in the department. And so when they went in and trained on the SARA model and problem-oriented policing, they actually put the crime analysts in the same training room with the officers. So they worked together on the definition and the analysis around these problems, and I think they found that to be a really smart thing to do, so to speak. Good. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you for that. Okay, this is going to be another quick run through 3 sites that have produced outcomes. Let's go. Boston was, I think some of you may know, Chief Ed Davis and his longtime research collaborator, Anthony Braga. So they did a really extensive, rather sophisticated analysis of violent crime in over 8,000 microplaces in the city of Boston that covered 30 years, and they came up with really very concise definitions of these hotspot problem areas. They were able to assign somewhat randomized control areas, and they implemented the safe street teams approach, kind of like a combination of community policing and problem-oriented policing. And after about a year's worth of work, they documented 17% reduction in violent index crime, 15% reduction in aggravated assaults, after accounting for the reductions that were realized in the control sites. So it was a very, very strong quasi-experimental design, actually, that validated for them how effective these safe street teams were. Next. Philadelphia did something very interesting. Some of you may know that they conducted a foot patrol experiment a couple years ago. That's been published. And they found some effectiveness of the foot patrol in that experiment. Well, this time around, they worked with these microplaces as well, and they identified 80 of them, and they randomly assigned 40 to different treatments. So 40 got problem-oriented policing, 40 got foot patrol, 40 got a more offender-focused approach to policing, right, targeting the most prolific offenders and working on them. And then there were 40 controls. And they found that above and even more than foot patrol or problem-oriented policing, it was this offender-focused policing that produced the greatest percentage reductions in crime. And again, that's accounting for reductions that they observed in the control sites. So this 22%, this 31% is reductions in addition to an overall drop in crime that was occurring. Let's go to the next slide. So I'd like to talk about Palm Beach because I think research-wise and methodologically, we could put Boston and Palm Beach at opposite ends of the spectrum. Palm Beach counties, as a sheriff's office, is a smart policing project that started with a new relationship with a research partner. They didn't have 10 or 11 years of working together like Ed Davis had with Anthony Braga. This was a new relationship. And this researcher is one of those that got much more involved in the operational end of things, working with the chief and the deputy chief and the smart policing team to build the organization structures that were needed to support the smart policing project, get things underway, get the detectives on board. And they didn't really focus a lot on a rigorous outcome design, partially because they were working with a community that didn't speak a language that anybody within 150 miles of their site spoke. They were working with a Guatemalan population. And so it was very difficult to survey anybody. It was very difficult to collect any information from these offenders and victims. So they ended up doing a much more organizationally oriented approach. So their research report is not that compelling, but the lessons learned by the department and the extent to which the sheriff has actually adopted a number of smart policing practices throughout the entire sheriff's department is actually quite impressive. So that's a slightly different kind of research orientation in a smart policing site. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, Hildy, I've given you 1 minute
Good.
to talk about the national meeting. Sorry about that, but let's just spend a few minutes on this, okay?
Okay. We want you to understand what's coming up and what you need to do to prepare. So the national meeting of the Phase 4 sites will be April 16th and 17th in Washington, D.C. You will be receiving details about that in the very near future, so don't worry. You'll get that soon, and you can begin planning. We do hope you will bring a number of your team members to that meeting. It's very important for a number of reasons. So at that meeting, we'll be stressing the fact that, you know, your projects are a bit of a work in progress. And so the project action planning we'll talk about, and it will give you an opportunity to work on your proposals or your initial design of your project. If you need to revise your goals and strategies in any way, you can work on that, and that's fine and expected if need be, and to improve your initiatives. We'll focus and stress those research partnerships and design so that you learn more about the expectations both from CJA's perspective as well as CNA's. We'll talk again about sustainability and how you can actually engage in that to the max. We'll focus on peer-to-peer networking. We'll give you lots of opportunities to talk with your peers, to interact and learn from each other. And we'll really focus on how you can receive support from both BJA and CNA throughout these initiatives. So next slide. So what we expect in terms of outcomes are these. We hope you'll have a better understanding of smart policing, of the expectations of BJA and CNA, and really that you begin to identify those pathways to success. We'll review and revise, or give you the opportunity to review and revise your project plans and perhaps develop these action plans. We'll hope you'll understand better how CNA, the subject matter experts, and BJA, and even others can be of assistance to you and how to access that assistance. And we're hoping that through all of these efforts and discussions that will really strengthen the smart policing community and that you will engage in peer-to-peer interaction throughout your couple of years' involvement. So next slide. So here's how you can prepare for that national meeting. You might want to review your site proposal and certainly bring that with you to the meeting. You might want to go on our website and look at the webinars. And perhaps you'll want to, at your leisure, listen to those webinars and learn from them if they're relevant to you. As Chip said, we have a number of them, anywhere from 10 to 12 webinars on a whole variety of topics. Check it out and take an hour and learn from those that we've done in the past. We'll have some coming up as well in the near future. And we have some suggested reading I believe you've already received the BJA fact sheet on smart policing. You might want to take a look at BJA's new solicitation, and you'll get a feel for their continuing to involve expectations for smart policing and the sites. You might want to take a look at all of the site summaries of all of the sites that have been funded in smart policing, and you can find those summaries on the smart policing website. We'll be sending to you as a little bit of homework before the meeting a Rachel Boba's stratified model and John X 60 small steps, and we'll hope that you'll read those and perhaps identify any issues or questions you have, and we can talk about those at the national meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vivian to take a minute or two to talk about our smart policing website, which can be a really valuable resource to all of you. Vivian?
Thanks, Sylvie. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. As we've mentioned before, our website is one of the primary tools that we have to really collect and disseminate information to all of you about smart policing and what the other sites are doing. There's a number of resources like webinars. We also have many podcasts on there from our sites and from just other law enforcement officers who have talked about smart policing. Summaries of all the national meetings are on there, our quarterly newsletter, and then a number of resources that we continually monitor and add to the website. One of the things I do want to highlight is the site pages that we have for each of your sites. This is a tool that we've given to each of the sites in order to add information about what they're doing, and we try to keep this very relevant and current. We set them up so each of the sites can edit themselves. We can give you user access to the website, and then you can add information. Otherwise, if you're too busy, you can also feel free to send information to us, and then we can do that for you. Then another key component about our website is our mailing list. Right now we have over 1,600 members, and we send out monthly updates and kind of relevant news about what's going on with the website and the initiatives. So if you haven't already signed up for the website mailing list, we encourage you to go to the front page and do that. And then the one last thing I want to talk about is our social media sites. We do have 4 social media sites that we're involved in, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'd say LinkedIn is probably our most active one, and we try to post fairly regularly and have a number of other SMEs who post LinkedIn discussions on that site as well. So we encourage you to follow those and engage in discussions with others in the SPI community. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Chip for any closing comments.
Thank you. I have very few, and we've kept you 6 minutes over schedule, so I apologize for that. Happy to take any final thoughts or questions from anybody at this point. Okay, so just a reminder that you'll be getting an evaluation form pretty soon. Please pay attention to that. And I'd like to say this, I say it often, that the wisdom and the experience and the capacity to make the changes that your projects are hoping to make all reside, within your teams. You don't need a whole cadre of national experts, and you don't need a whole big CNA organization to make this successful. We're here to help facilitate. As I say, sometimes I think that we help bridge the gap between what the sites are trying to do and what the federal expectations are. But if you recall those 3 slides that we went through with those 30 or 31 funded smart policing sites, there is just a ton of experience and a ton of information and actually a ton of goodwill in this project where you'll see when you come to this meeting the peer-to-peer interaction and the peer-to-peer support is one of the strongest and I think most productive components of smart policing. So I just encourage you to think that way. There's a lot of people trying to do what you're doing, working under these demands from BJA to have results and to be more scientific. Any way that we can help, we will. But you have a lot of people that are kind of working with you on this. And I just want you to think about it that way. You can have access to them or to any subject matter at any time that you want. So I thank you for your attention today. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can contact me or Vivian or Iris or Hildy. There's a nice, convenient little email called spi@cna.org. So if any question comes up, you can just send something there, and you'll get a very quick response. And as Hildy said earlier, just stay tuned, and we'll get you the information you need about the meeting coming up. Okay? So that's it for me. I thank you all very much. Vivian, thank you. Hildy, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.